Hey, what's up guys? My name's Dylan and welcome back to another Woodbrew video. And last week's video we made this amazing workbench, and in this week's video we're going to talk a little bit more about it in more detail. So if you haven't seen that video already though, go click the link in the description below or this little tab up here and go check that out first. Also wanted to let you know that we do have a set of plans available for this workbench, so if you're wondering any other details that I don't go over in today's video, go grab a set of plans and they'll tell you exactly how to build it with a lot of illustrations and stuff like that. So the first thing I want to talk about is the dimensions and what it's actually made out of. So it's 6 feet long, 27 inches wide, 34 inches tall, and has a 4.5 inch thick top. 4.5, 4.25, something like that. And it's made from construction grade southern yellow pine on the top, and the end caps as well as the vices are made from sapele. The base is made from 12 gauge 3x3 steel tubing. So on to the frequently asked questions. Probably the top question was, why did we use steel for the base instead of more traditional wooden legs? So really and truly we've been dabbling in metalwork a lot recently, and we thought it would just be a really cool, interesting thing to do, as well as it adds a lot of functionality and there are a lot of extra benefits. And one of those being is that it's extremely sturdy and will not ever flex or move. It also weighs a lot and it's really easy to build. So we actually made the entire bottom in probably 3 hours or so, whereas if you were to glue up wooden legs and joint them and add mortise and tenon and all that kind of stuff, that adds up quickly. The base also will never have to be replaced. The only thing that will have to be replaced on this workbench is the top, and who knows when that'll have to be replaced, maybe 10 years from now. So yeah, those are the main benefits of the metal, other than it looks freaking awesome, at least we think, and it's something different. So yeah, that's why we use metal. Because we're already talking about weight, we also had a lot of questions asking us how much does this thing actually weigh, and with some rough estimating using bath scales and stuff like that, we think with all the vices it's about 400 pounds, give or take. So yeah, it's quite hefty, does not move. If you have the casters up, it will not move when you put weight on it. So that's really great for hand planing or any other work like that. So the casters on this workbench were a hot topic as well. People wanted to know where we got them and how they work. Basically the way they work is they have a little plate that you can mount to your leg. We just used some metal tapping screws to screw them into our legs. And then they're keyed for the caster itself. So the caster can slide in and out on its own and has a pin to lock it in place. Now once it's in place, you can use a foot pedal, press down, and it lifts the whole workbench up. We got these from Rockler, and there'll be a link in the description below, as well as in the article, which will explain all this in more detail. Our workbench is definitely on the upper end of the scale of usable weight for these casters, but we've had absolutely zero problems with them. They don't feel like they're going to give out at all. In fact, in our last project building a media center, we had the media center up here, and I was on top of the workbench as well, putting finish on the top. And when I got back down, I had realized that I still had the casters up. So these casters held a 400-pound workbench with a media center that probably weighed another 100 pounds and me another 150 pounds. So you do the math, and that's an extreme amount of weight on top of this workbench and on top of those casters. So they're definitely a great value. As far as vices go for this workbench, it's equipped with 2 of them. We have a Rockler end vise down here, and it has worked extremely well. I haven't got to use it a whole bunch, so I'll give you some updates in the future. But it's really nice because you flip the workbench over, you throw some lag bolts into the vise, flip it back over, and you're ready to go. It's a good vise out of the box. There's no extra setup or anything like that. So that part of it is absolutely amazing, quick release and stuff like that. Now the leg vise, on the other hand, that we have on this side was made from scratch using about $35 worth of hardware, and it was a totally different animal. It took a while to make, and it also took a while to get working properly. Now I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it, but basically we took a screw that goes through the leg. It has a nut on the inside of the leg, and when you screw it out, the block comes out using a capture ring, and then there is a separate another pipe at the bottom with some holes drilled in it, and that keeps the vise aligned straight, and you can stick a rod through those holes to keep it parallel. Hope that makes sense. It's very similar to other designs. We just kind of use some different hardware to make it. If you're interested in building one of those, purchase the set of plans on our website. We're actually going to have a separate plans for the leg vise along with the workbench. Now the workbench does come with the leg vise plans included, but you can buy those separately and it'll show you exactly how to make one of those. So wood expansion was a bit of a concern in the comment section as well, because we have these cross grain end caps on the workbench. We've already compensated for that by enlarging the outside holes and using washer head screws in order to screw it in. Basically what that does is that as the top moves and expands, those screws can actually move a little bit in their holes and compensate for that. This workbench is actually shrunk by about 1/8 of an inch since we built it, and we've compensated for that by actually loosening up the mounting screws to the base and having to move the workbench back over so that the leg vise lines back up. So yeah, there is a lot of wood movement in this top since we built it. Several of you asked in the comment section how we flatten the top, and we actually did it by hand. But one thing we did while building it was try to keep things as flat as possible, so when we finally glued everything together, it was already really flat. There was very little work we had to do, but we used a number 4 smoothing plane and a number 9 plane using the winding stick method to flatten the workbench. Like I said though, there was very little work that had to be done. There was a big discussion on how we actually made the tool trough as well. All that is described in detail on the set of plans, but basically what we did was, this is a separate slab here, this is a separate slab here, and then there's 2 pieces that are smaller slabs, and they were cut on 45-degree angles, and when we glued them all 3 together, they actually made this trough. Now the bottom wasn't actually in it, and we just used a piece of plywood inset to create the bottom. One of the last questions we had in the comments section was, why did we angle the legs on the workbench? And the main reason is that this end vise requires you to have, I think it's about 16 to 17 inches of workbench surface to mount that to, where the rods come back under the table. So they actually come back all the way to here. Now if you had your set of legs all the way up front and you had a cross member, you wouldn't be able to put the vise on there. It just wouldn't be able to clear. So that was the main reason we did it, because we still wanted to have a cross piece running underneath. Now if you have big chunky legs, you don't necessarily have to do that, but it also gives a place for panels or other things to drop all the way down through the vise and to the ground without being interfered by legs or anything like that. And the angle just makes it to where there's a little extra support out there and a little bit more space underneath the workbench, instead of just doing a straight leg at about right here. That just looks a little better to have that angle in there. Just basically a stylistic choice for us. There's also some other reasons that some people would do it, but that's the reason we did it. So what are my favorite things about this workbench? One of which is definitely the tool trough. I didn't really know if I wanted to do that, but I talked to several people who had built workbenches, who had done it and who hadn't done it, and the overall consensus was just to make one. And I couldn't agree more. It's an extremely handy thing to have. You can easily take a hand plane that you're using, and while you're using it on something, when you're done, set it inside. It's completely out of the way. You can continue working on the entire surface. And what you don't run the risk into is if you have a board and you're swinging it this way, you're knocking your hand planes and other tools off the workbench. It really doesn't get in the way. It really doesn't take up any extra space. In fact, the majority of the work that I do is on the ends anyway. So yeah, that is a major thing that I'm really glad that I did. Another thing I'm really glad I did was make the base out of steel. It's really like it's a light feeling workbench, but it's not light at all. And it's extremely sturdy and does not move or budge at all. Every workbench I've had before this has always moved a small amount. Now I can plane on this thing or saw or anything like that, and there's absolutely no movement. The last thing is the leg vise. The leg vise is just an absolutely amazing vise to have. It's not necessary, but it's extremely strong and extremely useful. Already briefly talked about the casters, but those as well were just an extra added touch that we didn't realize how nice and convenient they would be, mainly because we can just lift the workbench up and move it out anytime we need to sweep or we want to get a better shot of the workbench or anything like that. It's extremely handy. So things that I would do differently. There's already a couple changes I've made since we made the workbench. More or less additions and less changes. So we've drilled our dog holes in the top of the workbench, And basically what that is you can take a little dog, is what they call them, and you can pop it up, and there's one that goes in the end of the end vise, and you can clamp things in between those. And so when you're planing a panel or doing anything like that, it's a great clamping solution. Or if you're using a hold fast, it's also great to have your dog holds in the workbench. And the other thing that we did since then was I actually put a steel plate on the end of the end vise. I was having a little bit of trouble with this single block of sapele wanting to flex a little bit when I was clamping only at the top of the vise. Completely resolved it with the steel plate. Also could have completely resolved it with another chunk of sapele glued to it, but I'd already oiled it and I didn't have any more sapele laying around. So the steel was a great option and a cool feature to add as well. So that's basically all the changes I've made so far. I haven't really found anything else that I don't like or that I need to change yet, but I'm sure that will change. I'm sure that there will be other things that I find in the future that I don't like about it, or things that I would have liked to have done differently or add on to it. And I'll let you guys know about that in a future update of the workbench. But as of right now, I freaking love this thing. It is absolutely amazing, and I highly, highly recommend that you guys try to make yourself a solid workbench like this. There's so much satisfaction using this workbench. It makes me want to get out into the shop just that much more. Well, that does it for the update with this workbench. I hope I answered all you guys' questions. If not, leave your separate questions down in the comment section below and I'll answer them there. But before you go, I want to let you know that Molly and I will be at the Rockler store opening in Kensaw, Georgia on February the 18th. We'll be there from 9 to 11 a.m. I believe April Wilkerson will be there as well. So come on by and say hey. There'll be a link to all the details down in the description below. Anyway, y'all have a good one, and we'll be back next week.